Call this meeting to order. Thank you. This is the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency special meeting of September 29th. I'm Stephen Sousa, and by way of noting, all members of the agency are present, so we'll deem that as the roll call. Except for County Rep, that's right. Mr. Saylor is not here at this present moment. I gather he will be eventually. Do we have any changes to the agenda? No. I would note that one item on our agenda, number 13, is probably moot. We can get to it, but since we, maybe during the report, we'll understand why. So we'll leave it on there. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda then, please?
So moved.
It's been moved by Director Doty and seconded by Director Marble. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That moves us to public comment. Do we have members of the public that would like to speak on items on the agenda and they can't stay for that item, or items that are not on the agenda? Will you both please come forward? Could you form a line, please? And I'll give you each 3 minutes. Lynn, could you set the timer for 3 minutes, please? And please speak directly into the mic. It's directional.
Okay, I'll do that. Yes, my name is Mikos Fabersum. I'm a resident of Davis, and I was before you on June 7th, I believe it was, to express concerns about one of the prospective bidders on this project, Veolia Water North America. And at that time, I also noted that there were no ethical criteria that had been included in the RFP, and so we made comments at that time. A couple of others were here at that time, and we also spoke before you. So today, we're kind of following up with that. I brought some other people with me who will be speaking individually as well. As you should be aware, I submitted to you through Linan a copy of a response letter that we had prepared actually in response to Mr. James Good of Veolia Water North America, who had made a reply to some of the allegations we had made at that June 7th meeting. And so you have with you, it's a lengthy letter. I will not attempt to go through point by point what's in it, but I would request that you read it and pay close attention. We spent a lot of time conferring with international people that are in Israel, Palestine, United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and France, around the world, who have intimate knowledge of what's going on, and we've prepared a very detailed and very careful reply to what Mr. Good has said. We have some other evidence of Veolia's wrongdoing that others will present here, including a ballot initiative in Novato last year, a response by Public Citizen, Ralph Nader's group, concerning water privatization, and some of the things that Veolia has put out publicly regarding that. We have a letter from a Palestinian organization opposing a Netherlands participation and opposing Veolia's participation in a public transportation bid. There's also what will be leaving you. I'll be leaving you many of these documents. They are not in what I've sent you already, and I will be distributing these to you here as I leave. And let's see. There's also a nomination that Veolia has received. It's called the 2012 Public Eye Award, to be given in Davos, Switzerland, for a company interested in making profit without concerns for social or environmental harm. They've been nominated to receive that award. The other thing I'm here to talk about, and I guess I have 10 seconds left, is to say that also in your packet is information about the ethical criteria that really is part of the RFP. And since I don't have time now, I will speak to that on item 12 later on the agenda. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ellen Brahms, and I'm with Sacramento Region Jewish Voice for Peace. And 50 years ago, in 1961, I was a freedom rider involved in the civil rights movement. And my participation in Jewish Voice for Peace in this Veolia issue is an extension of that sensibility. I want to read to you a quote from Alice Walker, June 4th, 2010. "It's time for us en masse to show up in front of our conscience and sit down in front of the only bus we have, our very lives. What would that be like today in this situation between Palestine and Israel? It would be to support boycott, divestment, and sanction, BDS, against Israel to end the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, and by this effort, begin to soothe the pain and attend the sorrows of a people wrongly treated for generations. This action would also remind Israel that we have seen it lose its way and call to it, often with love, and we have not been heard. In fact, we have reached out to it only to encounter slander, insult, and too frequently bodily harm." I also want to say Happy New Year. It's Rosh Hashanah today, and may this next year be one of peace.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Chris Yatuma. We're a long ways from, obviously, Israel, Palestine. We're here in Davis in Northern California, and there's obviously a big conflict that's been going on for many years, and you're probably wondering why Davis, Woodland, this water project is being brought into this international conflict of some fame. And the reason why you're being brought into it is because you've got an item on your agenda, number 12, dealing with the clean water project that is involving a company, Veolia, that is involved in some discriminatory practices inside Israel, within Israel proper itself, and within the occupied territories of the West Bank. So it's because Veolia, a company that's violating human and civil rights of Palestinians, that the group of us are here to talk to you and say, this is a bad corporate citizen. This isn't somebody you're going to want to do business with, because they are openly discriminating against people like me, an Arab. If I lived in Israel as an Israeli Arab citizen, there are buses that Veolia operates that I couldn't go on. But my friend Ellen, she was Jewish Israeli. She could show her ID card and she could be on that bus. I can't go on it. That's why we're here. There are companies, Veolia is just one of them, but it discriminates. It helps, it is complicit in this occupation that's going on that openly discriminates against 20% of the population in Israel is Arab Israelis. And 20% of that population would not be able to get on those buses operated by Veolia. And this company now is before you bidding on this clean water project. We don't think you should let them bid on this. We think you should reject their contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
My name is Ellen Levy, and I'm also with Sacramento Jewish Voice for Peace. And just very briefly, I just want to point out that there's this is in your packet. It lists, in addition to Veolia's role in the occupied territories, it's had quite a few problems in the United States involving wastewater management and other issues. So we would encourage you to contact some of the officials in these cities and these locations, Petaluma, San Francisco, other places around the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Seeing no further public comment, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question of Chris, if you don't mind. Can I do that?
Are you going
It's
to?
information about the transit system in Israel.
You can do it on your own.
You can do it now, or you could do it under the item. Are you going to remain for the item?
Mikos is here, and I'll remain. But if you go on and fire it.
You want to do it now or
Yeah,
during
it's
the item?
just a basic
Okay.
question. I'm wondering,
Please,
is that
please come forward.
you said that she could just show her ID and get on the bus. Is the public transportation in Israel free, or do you pay a fee when you board?
I believe you pay a fee.
Okay.
Or you can have a pass similar to a light
So
rail
it's
pass.
like here you buy a pass and you get.
But in Israel, all citizens, whether you're Arab, Druze, Circassian, Jewish, have to carry IDs at all times.
Sure.
And on those IDs, it indicates whether you're Arab, Jewish, Druze, whatever your nationality is. So when you hand that ID to the bus driver, he knows automatically, if you're Arab, you can't get on that bus. That's the type of discrimination. I mean, it just seems outrageous. If I pulled out my driver's license and it said, I was Jewish or Muslim here in this country, that'd be an outrage.
Well, it's bad business, too. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Having no further comments, we have a closed session item, and we will move into closed session for a period, and we'll come back, and if there's anything to report out, we shall do so. So please enjoy yourself. I believe there's some treats in the back if you'd like to enjoy them. We'll do that announcement after closed session.
Did you see that the voters?
I'd like to call the meeting back to order. First thing, I would like to recognize that, and I didn't do so, the staff members that are with us, but in particular, Nick Ponticello, who is from the City of Woodland, who is on the Technical Advisory Committee and has been for Yolo County Transportation. Welcome, Nick. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is discussion and consideration of approving or authorizing the contract for new general manager. Who would like to lead this? Mr. Shanahan, would you like to start it off for us?
Thank you, Mr. Souza. Following up from the closed session discussion with the ad hoc committee, now is the opportunity for the board, if it wishes, to consider acting on the proposed agreement with Deemer Engineering Incorporated to provide general manager services for the agency as recommended by the ad hoc committee.
Thank you.
Contract's been distributed to the board members. Do you have any questions?
Yes. Anybody? Questions? Comments?
Yeah, I just want to ask, as we move from one general manager to the next, and we've got a set budget for this agency, what are the financial implications of making this move and bringing on Deemer and Associates at this point? I guess that could be for Paul or...
I'll take a stab and then others can fill in. The way the contract's been structured is for the balance of this fiscal year, 11-12, we provided a not-to-exceed limit on the contract consistent with the money remaining in the agency budget for this year for general manager services. As we go through the course of this fiscal year with the new general manager, Deemer Engineering will be evaluating whether or not that's adequate, sufficient time or revenue, or whether more time may be required, in which case the new general manager would approach the board later for a budget and contract adjustment if appropriate.
Okay. So there's no current budget impact. I mean,
correct. As the contract's currently structured, it should be seamless on the budget. Right.
And we're to some extent in the same world we're always in, which is we've got a general manager position that's 50% time that can kind of go up a little bit under the contract, and we'll just continue to evaluate that.
Right, and we will
Okay.
encourage the new general manager to take a hard look at how much time's involved in the job, and if he concludes that it's more than half time, then we will encourage him to come back to the board at the appropriate time in the fiscal year to make that request.
Good, good. Fine.
Any other questions or comments by board members? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the contract to hire as the new general manager, Mr. Dennis Deemer? Been moved by Marty.
Second.
Seconded by Bill Marble. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. And so I guess what I'd like to do at this point, before we go into consent calendar, since we still have with us Dr. Eric Mishi, who is still our general manager, I would like to at least do some recognition of your service to our agency. And along those lines, there is cake in the back that others have participated in eating. And
There's still some left.
There's still some left for you, sir.
Lynn Ann gave me some cookies also, so
Well,
that helps.
That's good. And I have a very small token of our appreciation, so I would like to ask everybody to come out here in front so I can present. Mishi? So, Eric, I can say that it's been a pleasure to get to know you. It's been very rewarding personally to tap your intellect and knowledge in the arena of water project and the engineering thereof. I'm sorry you're leaving us, but I'm also happy that you're moving on to a very big project and something that from a career standpoint you'll get a lot of satisfaction out of. Their gain, our loss. And I know that what we have here for you is a certificate of appreciation and recognition of your outstanding leadership on behalf of the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency. And this is something you can hang on your wall, but be certain to eat some of that cake because that's something that will last longer with you.
Oh, yeah, I don't need much more of that.
That's right. So I personally want to thank you, and I'll let anyone else from the board want to say anything.
I'll just add, Eric, since you served while I was chair, that we deeply appreciate your assistance with this critical project for our two cities and our two communities. We know you'll be close by, and we'll look forward to having continued association.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say that I really valued your knowledge and your ability to keep us on task. This is all new ground for a lot of us, and it's a large project for both cities, and you've made it seem that we could accomplish it. Thank you.
Once again, the Bay Area has to look to Yolo County for guidance and continue the fine tradition.
On behalf of Yolo County, thank you for your service here. This is a unique project that involves a lot of collaboration, and your professionalism and your personal style have managed this very effectively through the course of things to this milestone. So good luck to you. Congratulations, and thank you.
Thanks, Eric, for all of your hard work and working closely with you as part of the technical groups. I can say that your time here wasn't as long as we would have liked, but I think your contributions will really be long-lasting. Thanks.
So I'll give you the certificate now and ask you if you would like to say anything on.
Thank you. Oh, there's a lot I could say, and but it has been a great experience, and I really appreciate the support of the board, technical advisory committee, and the staffs of the cities, and also from our program management team led by Jim Yost. And I think you're all in good hands, and from the person you've selected, coupled with the team you already have in place, it's a tremendous team. I've been fortunate really to be part of this early stages and to get it going, so I appreciate it. And one last thing, I got to tell you that the person who really keeps this organization moving is Lynn Ann Melhoff. I want to really appreciate what she has done and made my job easy and makes me look good, which is one of my career key criteria when I give people objectives. But anyway, thanks, Lennon. It was great.
Back to work. That moves us to consent calendar. Any items from the consent calendar that we would like to remove and have discussion on?
I'd like to make a comment on item A, and I'd like to pull item E.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the remainder of the calendar, B, C, and D?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Comment on item A.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The item A has a critical brief on Ken Landau's comments as an executive for the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And the brief and summary that is in this item, I think is critical enough that I want to make sure that it's posted not only on the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency website in its format here, but that it's also posted on the Woodland City website and the Davis City website. I think this summary of comments is critical to the public's understanding some of the rationale for this project. So I'd just like to make that suggestion. And I don't think I need to move that, but that would be my suggestion unless
It is
somebody
special
has
mini
concern.
meeting, so we do need a motion to approve.
Okay, then I would approve, I would make a motion to approve item A with that request that those comments be posted.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Then we have item E.
Stephen,
Yes.
just on that, I'll maybe make a very, very brief point, which is the City of Davis's webpage now has a front page link titled Water Issues, and then if you click on that, there's a whole host of things that relate to the project specific to Davis. So that'd be a perfect spot for us to make sure this is there, although it might be there already. I clicked on it this morning and I was very impressed. So we've got a spot for that, and I'm sure Woodland does as well. But between Bob and Kim, I'm sure we can put it prominently and pretty quickly on the Davis site. That's it.
I concur, and
Great.
I also concur that the words are very necessary to be read and heard by folks who have not heard those words from Mr. Landau.
And just, I'll just add, Vice Mayor Skip Davies and I met with Mr. Landau approximately 2 years ago, and the summary of that meeting is on our city's website and could also be included certainly in the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency website. It's a brief summary, much like this summary, but details a meeting that we had in Sacramento in his office and responses that I think the public should be aware of that we received there.
Item E.
Item E, I have thought for the last little while that this board ought to consider stopping where we're at in terms of Plan B. We're aggressively pursuing Plan A for the intake facility. Mr. Souza and I have been in Washington, D.C. now twice with Reclamation District 2035. We've been in congressional offices. Our last visit there, as he'll report, we were in 13 offices. And every indication that we've received to date, even though the funding levels for the years 13, 14, and 15 are not known, every indication we have is that intake site will be funded and that we'll be moving forward with it. And I know we have utilized Plan B as a hedge. If you look on item 6E in the last paragraph on page 1, I note that this action would increase the contract for 1113 by $178,000, which is the additional amount for Plan B. I would suggest that, and maybe this needs to come up for some additional discussion, I don't know, but I would suggest from my vantage point at this particular juncture that the board ought to consider eliminating the pursuit presently of Plan B. I don't know how the Regional Water Quality Control Board would feel, but it seems logical to me that if we are aggressively pursuing Plan A, which we're doing, and something happened to upset that apple cart that, and it wasn't our fault, and that necessitated our moving into Plan B, that there might be some leeway there that we would have because we have been aggressively pursuing Plan A. And I'd like to see us save the agency all the money we can. And I'd also like to see us be fully committed and engaged with Plan A at 100% level. So I think unless staff could convince me otherwise, I'm willing to relinquish at this point in time the pursuit of Plan B in terms of costs. It's still on it still would remain on the drawing board, but anyway, that would be my concern about item 6E.
Any other board member? Marty?
The only question I have, and I don't know if it's for Eric, is if we do this, if we set this aside, how long does it take us to catch back up if for some reason we have to go to Plan B? How much of a delay does this potentially represent?
The Plan B, we've deferred doing work on Plan B for that very reason of not trying to duplicate costs and putting all our efforts into Plan A, which seems to be moving along very nicely. The concern is whether Plan A will be fully funded, which means through the Bureau of Reclamation and the California Department of Fish and Game. And we really won't know that if monies will be available until the middle of next year, and that's after the 100% design is finished of the intake and all the environmental work is finished. If there's an economic situation where there's monies not available, it would just put in limbo that project. It would defer it for whenever monies would be if we stayed in working with CPG in 2035. We've held off the environmental work on Plan B as long as possible, so it should be starting now if we were to continue that track, so that it would be finished by approximately the April-May timeframe, which would then allow us then to get the permits that will allow us then to start designing facilities for the Plan B site January 2012. So that was the critical path. It would only be done. So the monies that would be at risk prior to June or the summer of 2012 would be simply this additional environmental studies. One other thing. What
Jim, you want to?
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Jim.
Eric is correct. The work that would be done this fiscal year on Plan B was primarily environmental, but we are about to launch on entering the Sacramento River and doing borings out in the river for that intake. And that may have even started while I was on vacation, I don't know, but very close. They were getting all the permits to allow them to do that. So, but we could certainly stop that if that was the board.
I know you and I have had that discussion a little bit, Jim, and it wasn't a surprise to you that I would say that tonight, this afternoon, but I didn't get a strong sense from you that you felt don't do that.
You know,
I know you want to hedge our bets, but I really would like to see us fully engage in option A and just make that our option.
Don.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chairman, the A and B are two different locations for an intake facility on the river.
Yes. Plan B was not part of the EIR originally, so it would require a new EIR, a separate straw in the river. It's certainly the the worst option out there for us, but we have wanted to hedge our bets.
Plan B was a agency-only intake facility about a half a mile upstream from the joint facility, which is Plan A.
Yeah, and that describes the point. And I, on this particular item, I have to concur with Dr. Marble that after the 13 meetings and the second visit from the agency perspective, and the third visit this year, from my perspective, once on behalf of the cap-to-cap trip, in which the project was one of the regional top projects, I had a very strong feeling, particularly from the Bureau of Reclamation, and the legislators for that matter too, but the Bureau of Reclamation, that they would like to hurry up the construction funding. That we have all the necessary design funding. It's the construction funding from the state and the federal government that we are pursuing still. But, and we are now going down, we have not done a lot of lobbying and pursuit as an agency representatives to the state, but we have to the feds. And they would, the feeling I got is they would like to find the means to get to the money to us faster. And that gave me great assurance that why should we continue to spend money on an environmental reports and evaluation when it may not be necessary. And if we, as has been pointed out, if we can get to a point where we feel extremely satisfied and that we're not going to be harmed by delaying any further environmental work, then I think we should just stop it at this point. And Bill and I had a conversation over one of our dinners after, I think it was our last meeting, and we both were just amazed at the reception we got and the feeling that we should just cease Plan B. So there is a...
So I guess I'd make a motion, unless I haven't heard any strong opposition from staff. I've heard a calculated risk assessment. I understand that.
I just, for full revelation of all the facts, I just want to point out that the state funding is also required. So it's a 50-50 match, and we would also have to get funding from the state. Personally, that's the one I'm the most concerned about. But I understand the decision, and I think it's probably a good one.
Then I'll make a motion that item 6E be approved with the modification that we will not be adding any funding to the contract for Plan B.
And just for clarification, most of the work that's in this item E is not on Plan B, but
right.
It's already covered.
That's why
under
we have to
contract.
approve the item. I just want it clear that we would remove funding for Plan B currently.
It's been moved. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Discussion?
I'm going to be supportive. I think the reasoning is sound, and it's the flip side of everything going well on Plan A.
And I'm assuming that our relationship with 2035 now is collegial.
We are in a full partnership, really, with 2035.
We are working together towards the same goal.
Yes, that is.
The hatchet, so to speak, has been buried.
The hatchet has been buried, and we are partners, fully pledged to seeing the intake facility built at the 2035 location.
Okay. Thank you.
No further comments. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Great.
Mr. Chair, I have a responsibility I have to keep with my parents, which I told you about earlier. So I've given you questions relating to one of the important items here tonight with Balfour Beatty.
Yes, you have, and of course, if you want to, you can always come back later. Of course, that's if we're still here later.
My parents still live here in Davis, and at 83 years old, there's some obligations I have to keep, and this is one.
Well, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I have to leave by 5.
All right, then we're going to have to move to items of great importance and maybe put a few off that may not need any action. So with that, what can we have two informational pieces. One is item 8 and item 9. We'll move those to the end of the agenda because there is no action required. They're just informational.
Correct.
And the update, Dr. Mishi, you were going to deliver under item 7.
Yes, I could.
We can move that to the end also?
Sure.
So that would then take us to item 10, which requires action, and then 11 and 12 and 13. So we'll just follow that path and see how fast or how well we can get through these items. So it would take us then to item 10, which is to consider a resolution approving water treatment plant capacity and city dedicated capacity shares under the joint powers agreement.
Okay, good. Well, this item addresses a lot of work that's been done on how to phase in the various facilities, and particularly the treatment plant facility. And I'd like to have Jim Yost give you an update on that.
Okay. Basically, what we've been doing is, and I've reported to you previously on the modeling we were doing to try and understand the comparison of supply and the deficits that were created by demands in dry years and so forth. Well, part of that modeling also was looking at the capacity of the treatment plants and other facilities. And through that whole process, through discussions with the staff of the two cities, it was concluded that the most cost-effective way to move forward with the project was to stage it. That's consistent with the direction in the 2007 EIR that was certified on the project, and that the first stage ought to be 40 million gallons per day. So that's the plan. We would size the screens and most of the structure at the new joint intake at 52 MGD, but the pumps and motors and so forth would be 40 MGD. We would size the raw water pipelines carrying that water from the intake to the treatment plant at 52 MGD, the ultimate capacity. We would oversize some elements of the treatment plant where it was cost effective to do now and would cost you 10 times as much to do if you did it later. But in general, the sizing of the treatment plant would be 40 MGD. And then the delivery system taking treated water to the two cities would also be 52 MGD. The pumps that would be installed at the regional water treatment facility to convey water to the two cities would be downsized in this first stage to meet the delivery capacity for a total of 40 MGD.
One thing I'd like to add, make sure this is on. I'd like to add that the resolution that's going to be before you is relative to the capacity of the treatment plant and how it relates to the JPA agreement. And if you might have some questions of Mr. Yost, but Dick Shanahan can address the implications to the JPA agreement.
And I apologize, but part of the reason these items were scheduled the way they were is I had some slides to explain this in much more detail than the cost estimate. So you're kind of getting an ad hoc presentation here. But the bottom line, as I understand it, Dick, and I think this was decided while I was away, is that if UC Davis moved forward, they would want 1.8 MGD of the 40 MGD, and they would therefore pay for 4.5% of the treatment plant, but their percentages on the remainder of the regional system would remain at 3.5% as specified in the JPA agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And if the board approves this item, the proposed resolution, then the other thing the resolution does is it directs agency staff to approach the university to discuss an appropriate related amendment to the option agreement we have with the university. Their rights are separate from the joint powers agreement. Now they've got their own contract, and then we would revisit that contract to adjust the percentages in that contract concurrent with these revised percentages. The joint powers agreement contemplated that although the project as initially approved was a 51.8 MGD treatment plant, it contemplated that size may change, and it authorizes the board by resolution to reduce or increase, as the case may be, the treatment plant capacity. And that's what's before you this afternoon, is just make that change concurrent with the engineering and city recommendations.
And Monique put the slide up that shows you what the result of that would be. If UCD doesn't participate, the two cities get the capacity shown there, and if UC does participate and they get 1.8 MGD, you see the resultant impact that has on the capacity available to the two cities.
Any further staff comments on this item? I'll move to board. Anybody wish to speak to this? Nope. Yes, Marty.
The 40 MGD is, well, where'd he go?
Jim?
Oh, sorry. The 40 MGD, that's based on what? The downsize estimates based on conservation?
Money, can you pull up those two slides that show the ones that show the water demands for the two cities? Well, basically, what has happened is since 2005, when the projections for the ultimate capacity of the plant were developed, the per capita demands, this is a demonstration of the per capita demands of the city of Davis. Their per capita demands and the resultant projection of water demand resulting from them is 25% lower than it was when we did that work back in 2005. And if you'll now go to the city of Woodland, theirs is even, click it one more time, theirs is 30 to 35% lower. So the recommendation results from the fact that the two cities have done a great job reducing their per capita demands. Obviously, the financial economic conditions have had an impact as well, but they are projected to have much lower per capita demands. They do now, they'll go even lower. There is an aggressive program built into both cities to reduce their per capita demands, and this is the result.
And how long do you think the 40 MGD, what's the timeline on that? When do you think it'll have to upscale?
We're guessing it will be out close to probably late 2030, early 2040 before we would have to expand the plant.
All right, thank you.
I'd further ask Jim along those same lines. That's anticipating the further conservation that the city of Davis has built into its rate structure.
Yes, this is very consistent with that, and it's consistent with the state law requiring a 20% in reduction in demand by 2020. Actually, I think both cities will exceed that, will achieve that before 2020 and probably exceed it in 2020.
And then the last question along these lines, I don't have the engineering of the facility in front of me, and in fact, I don't even think we have anything of a substantial nature for us to view right now. But within the ability to upgrade, we are not going to, and this will, at least as far as the DBO discussion goes, we are not going to be putting items in the end of the plant or for expandability that would be technology that would be superseded in the future?
No, that's definitely not the case. Most of the cost that's going to be related to whether you build a 40 or a 52 MGD is internal piping in the plant, the concrete structures and that kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing we'd suggest be put in the plant now because it can be done very economically. If you come back and have to tear piping out and so forth in the future, it'd be very expensive. So that's the kind of thing that would be added. The treatment processes will be sized for 40 MGD.
And then last question for myself is it even possible to go smaller? Because with each increment, there's a decrease in cost.
Yeah, we looked at a whole array of different sizes of plants, and 40 MGD really appears to be the optimum size for this stage one.
We wouldn't want to overbuild.
We don't want to overbuild, and we don't want to underbuild. So, everywhere you look at it, from being able to meet your deficits in dry years and all those kind of things, it appears to be just about on target.
Great. Questions, comments?
Jim, if you would, so this is off of our last year's urban water management plan. We've got a new one, so we'll be updating that. I assume that the numbers aren't significantly different between what we submitted last year and this year to the state. But the we don't really know what's going to happen in the communities as a result of the cost going up, and there's probably no greater change to behavior than a price signal sends, throughout the entire system. And the slope of the line there, still looks almost equal to me of the 2005 number. And so it does make me wonder whether or not the price factor and the increased conservation that's going to happen, or greater awareness, whether it's through programs or just self-regulation, we're going to see. So are we comfortable that line is going to be that steep on a per for the community?
Well, most cities, as I stated earlier, already have achieved significant reduction in per capita demands, and
right,
have.
But we've I don't want to argue with you, but we've achieved that without a whole lot of a price signal. I mean, we've gone to two-tier in Davis. We've done something with our sewer rates, which really encourages people to get their sprinklers off during the winter. But this is a significant price increase for the community. There's tremendous publicity about it, of course. Everybody's going to really be noticing it on their bill. So I just wonder if there's other communities where we've seen this kind of a price, shock, I'll even say, and what that's going to do to demand.
I'll tell you one of my observations, and that is that statewide, all water agencies are seeing dramatic reductions right now in per capita water demands. I've been in this business for a long time. I've seen this before. I don't have a tremendous amount of confidence that that number is going to stay in place. I expect those demands over time will come back up again. The times are so bad that people are doing things now that they wouldn't do under normal conditions. There are a lot of foreclosures. There's a lot of things happening in the community that reduce demands, and I believe the very low demands we're seeing these days will ultimately increase. I don't know whether it'll be 5 years or 10 or 15 years, but I think they will go up. So I'm comfortable with the fact that if that happens, we have still built in a significant amount of reduction in demand to achieve this curve that we're showing.
Yeah. I probably don't agree with you on the things will come back up, but, be that as it may. I guess the more interesting question then really is, just because we design to 40 MGD doesn't mean that's what's going through the plant.
Absolutely not.
There's always going to be fluctuation within that, and quite frankly, there's always going to be an incentive for us to move lower, because that's going to save energy in treatment, it's going to save energy in transmission, it's going to wear on the system, and we're going to use less chemicals. I mean, all kinds of things are still going to provide an incentive for conservation, just because the capacity is designed at one level. So then the question really is, do we design the capacity different to create less headroom or not? And I guess you're saying it's your professional judgment that 40 is a good place to be for a long period of time, and that's what we want to do too. We want to spend our money now on a system that pushes it down, but make sure that we can use that capital asset for a long period of time.
And when we have projected out the operational costs for the plant, the biggest components are energy and chemicals and labor.
Yeah.
And so, if you don't use the plant, you don't pay for energy, you don't pay for chemicals, you obviously have to pay back the capital cost. But those two components of operational costs would be less if we don't run the plant at 40 MGD.
Right. So the incentive for conservation is going to last
still very
there
strong
because of those cost components being significant. The terrible thing would be to build something that for whatever reason we had to start retrofitting in a near-term period of time, which would be fantastically expensive for our communities. So I think if it's your professional judgment that this is a good level to be at, I'm comfortable accepting that. And I especially like it because all it does is, sets the ceiling, and then we, can hopefully move down from that for all kinds of good reasons, including saving money.
And I don't want to imply to you that I'm the only one that has this opinion. We've had substantial and long meetings where we've talked about this with the two cities in a lot of detail and have gone through an extensive amount of modeling, and it really pretty clearly shows us this is the optimum size.
Good. All right. I'm fine. Thanks.
Any further staff or comments from boards? Any further staff comments? Any public comments on this item? Seeing none, move to the board here. We have a resolution before us modifying the initial capacity of the raw water treatment facility and dedicated capacity shares to the JPA partners. Is there a motion to move that?
I move approval of the resolution proposed by staff.
I second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Thank you. That moves us to item 11. This is consider Balfour Beatty Infrastructure, Inc.'s request concerning board decision on water supply project design, operate procurement statements of qualifications, and possible consideration of approving a fourth firm to receive the DBO request for proposals. So we have, will staff introduce this, please? Who's going to take this item on first? Dr. Mishi.
This is an item that's received a lot of attention from staff, and I'd like to have Jim or Jerry address that from the staff's position relative to that request from Balfour Beatty. Sorry.
We have had some discussion about this with you in the past, and actually have given you a memorandum that had a recommendation in it. But let me just quickly go through some of the issues. To refresh your memory, 5 firms submitted statements of qualification in response to our request. We formed a facilities procurement committee, which is city staff and some of the consultant team, to review those. We did a tremendous amount of work reviewing those. We came up with a recommended short list of 3 firms. You approved that short list at the June 7th, 2011 meeting, and we started moving then into the next step that Jerry Gilbert will describe in more detail in the next agenda item. Balfour Beatty in that ranking was ranked 4th. I received both verbal communication and a letter from them, and I believe Bill Marble, who was chairman of the board at the time, received a letter from them also to consider allowing them to be on the short list and consider expanding the short list to 4 firms. The FPC took that item under discussion, under consideration, and came up with the recommendation that we suggest that you retain the approved shortlist and issue the RFP to the 3 shortlisted firms. So what's the basis for our recommendation? Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay, Monique, put it back up. So the basis, put the next slide up. The basis is, when we went through evaluation of all the qualifications of the team, we rated the Balfour Beatty team as adequate in terms of sufficient capacity to do the project. We rated the other 3 firms more adequate. And the reason we did that, more qualified and qualified. The reason we did that was the partner that Balfour Beatty team had for operations was significantly less qualified, we felt, than the operator portion of the 3 firms that were rated more qualified. The Balfour Beatty team, although very experienced with a lot of good components, had less experience as a water DBO team than the 3 firms that we shortlisted. And there was a design reference that we called and got, not a real favorable response on. So that's how we put them into 4th place primarily. Lots of other considerations went into it, but these were the primary ones. And then the basis for our recommendation, we made it very clear when we sent out the RFQ that we would shortlist the 3 firms, and this is a very common approach in the industry. And I want to point out that the type of procurement process we're going through right now on this selection for a contractor is very, very different than folks are used to. It's not a design, bid, build process. So what happens is there are probably 6 teams in the United States that can do this work. So I know a lot of folks have said, why don't you have 25 firms competing? There aren't 25 firms in the United States that could compete for this work. Having 3 firms is very, very common on this design build, or certainly on a design build operate procurement process. We feel it's very important that we maintain credibility with the teams. We've taken them partway through the process already. We want them to trust our selection criteria and so forth. Increasing the risk obviously has an impact on the 4 folks that are on the short list. It increases their risk and certainly not beneficial to them. It would increase the agency costs, could result in some project delay, and as I tried to point out a few minutes ago, these shortlisted teams are very highly respected in the industry, and you will get 3 very high quality and very competitive price proposals out of these 3. That's the end of my formal comment.
Questions from board members? Anybody?
Jim, a couple questions. Have we had interest from the 5th firm or the other firm that we didn't include in the down select that they want to continue to be considered, or have they headed off into the sunset?
The FPC met with the firm that was the team that was rated 5th. We explained to them all the reasons why they were rated 5th, and they seemed comfortable with that, and we haven't heard from them since.
Okay, so just dealing with this one situation. The point that I'm stuck on most, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Bellflower Beatty, I see their presentation here, is that for the other 3 who are in, if we accept a 4th, and I understand the Bellflower Beatty proposal that we not necessarily have to get into paying the review team and so on until we see what the bid prices are and those kinds of things, but for the other 3, their probability now of staying in the game goes down, not insignificantly, for the amount of money that they're putting in, because they could be, if we only reviewed fully 3 to make sure that this agency doesn't spend more money on the full review, then that means that somebody who spends time making a proposal to us has a 1 in 4 shot of getting a goose egg before they ever get a chance to move forward in the process. And one could make the case that maybe that's okay because maybe they had the highest price anyway, and might as well weed them out of the process sooner rather than later. But on the other hand, if you're them, your enthusiasm for bidding probably goes down, knowing that you could be let go much earlier in the process than you are certainly expecting at this point in time. So I worry that one of the 3 most qualified firms would say, "Thanks a lot, guys. We're out of here." And if that happens, and then we've only got 2 of the most qualified firms in the pool, we're starting to play games with a lot of money here, and that makes me nervous. I may be completely wrong in this. It involves speculation, but do you think we have any risk of losing one of the most qualified firms because we start, inviting in somebody that we had previously, not included in the cut? That's a big risk to me. It's a huge risk to me.
Let me just point out that I have had very friendly discussions with Balfour Beatty. This is certainly not there's no animosity on either side. We're working very closely together. So I had breakfast with them. Actually, it was the night after staying here until 3:30, and I was half an hour late for breakfast. But anyway, I had breakfast with them, and we had a good discussion, and one of the things I asked them is, let's reverse this. What if you were one of the 3 shortlisted firms? What would you think of adding a 4th firm? And they said we wouldn't be happy with it.
Yeah.
So, yes, I believe there is some risk that we will either damper the enthusiasm of the 3 firms that we have in place or possibly risk losing one. I have certainly gotten no feedback from them that that's the case, but you haven't taken an action yet either, so.
Right. Okay, that's all I have.
I'd like to follow up on a question. This is probably for Mr. Shanahan. What would the legal risk potentially be?
I don't view any legal risks. It's really a business decision for the agency board to make, evaluating the criteria and risk factors as outlined by staff. legally, you're within your rights to add a fourth firm if you wish, or you've likewise got substantial grounds to deny the Balfour Beatty if you wish. Request.
Marty?
Yeah. And I think this is for Mr. Yost again. Sorry to make you stand up. A couple of things. You said it increases, where is it at? I can't read it.
Increases the cost for...
Well, no, I'm not, I mean, on a project this size, that's not a significant number. But list of 4 increases, the proposer's risk. How does it increase their risk? Because there's more competition?
Because they're no longer 1 and 3, they're now 1 and 4. So they've got a 1 in 4 chance they're going to win, not a 1 in 3.
But isn't it better for us to have more to select from?
I think the competition for this project will be intense. It will come down to very, very close competition on their ability to do the work, and certainly on the cost. I believe we have all the competition we need. I'm not convinced that adding a 4th firm will beneficially impact the agency at all. Now, Balfour Beatty's team had some components that were very good, and we evaluated those and judged them, but they also had some things that weren't as good as the others, and so that's how we settled in on 3.
Okay. On the question of 3 being the common industry approach, that's usually not a good argument for me.
No.
3 is a magic number, so
Yeah.
it could be 7.
I would just add, Marty, that when we polled the Facilities Procurement Committee, those 3 firms were at the top of everybody's list.
Understood. But when you made that presentation the last time, I didn't get the feeling that Balfour Beatty were really that far down. I got the feeling that they were closer to being in the top group, but that there was a cutoff point at 3. And it didn't seem to me that they were an automatic drop-off like the 5th group was, because they basically had none of the experience you were looking for, that Balfour Beatty was in the middle point someplace, and if there had been a decision to have 4 firms, they would have been in.
I think that's probably a fair assessment.
So they're really out because you decided to do 3.
We decided to do 3. When we came to you telling you we were going to go out with an RFQ, we said one of the criteria will be we will shortlist to 3 firms, and so that was our assignment.
I understood. Okay, that's all my questions.
Don, you have a question, but before you get there, I just want to remind folks that the motion that when back in June, I think it's June 30th of last year, was to keep Balfour Beatty and essentially in the dugout in case one of the firms dropped out.
Absolutely.
They would then become one of the team players.
And I had a discussion with their team in that regard, and they said they would definitely want to be considered as being in the dugout, and if we lost one of the other firms, they would definitely want to be back in the running.
But doesn't that really present a big delay then?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't that present a potential for a big delay? Because we know that these are going to be very complicated documents that are prepared, and if they're starting 6 months later than everybody else, doesn't that...
If we start moving forward into the RFP process, as we hope we will when you give us approval to do so today, then they would begin to get behind. And if they joined in 2 months or 3 months from now, we would probably have to delay the project for a while to give them an opportunity to get back up to speed.
Yeah, okay.
And we will get to a presentation, and I hope you keep it short, but Director Saylor.
Just a question for Eric or Jim. Is there a possibility that one of the 3 firms or one of the 3 consortia may drop out for some reason?
Well, I think that's purely speculative. I mean, I have nothing, as Mr. Yost indicated, there's nothing really to indicate that.
So the cost for the consortia to develop the proposal, those costs are substantial.
The Facilities Procurement Committee, and Jim can elaborate on this, estimate that it would be additional $250,000 to $300,000
for the agency to review them.
For the agency to go through the process that is been defined in fairly evaluating each of the competitors.
But the consortium itself would require an expenditure to prepare the proposal.
Yeah, the way this process works, if you recall the steps, and again, Jerry Gilbert could show you the slide that explains this in more detail, but basically what's going to happen, we're going to send out the RFP, it's going to be a draft, they're going to review the draft, they're going to come back to us with their comments, as will the general public. We will modify the RFP to integrate all those comments. They will then come back to us with a proposal that says, here's how we intend to, here's the facilities that we have come up with to match up with your benchmark process, your benchmark project. To do that, they're going to have to do a significant amount of work. Then we will comment, we'll review those, comment to them, then they will come back to us again with their final proposal, which will include cost. And to get to a point where they can give us a guaranteed price, they're going to have to do a substantial amount of work. To get to that point in this process is multi-million dollars.
Multi-million, and so any firm or consortium like Balfour Beatty and their partners would be investing a substantial amount of money in the
That's
project.
correct.
And they're apparently willing to do that.
They are willing to do that, and that is, again, very common in this industry. That's how the design build and design build operate processes work.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask one question about the DBO process,
Please.
What's the primary protection of the ratepayers in this approach as opposed for the price? Because of course people are familiar with a design and then a bid, or even a design bid, where people get a better sense, public can watch more closely what the dollar amounts are. So what's the public protection on price in the DBO approach?
I've got a slide that shows you exactly what the attributes are of the DBO process.
You're getting him into his next slideshow presentation.
So
yeah, there is overlap between the two subjects.
do you want me to? Let me try and be brief.
No, this is I think pertinent. I think it's a very very valid point, and I'd rather hear it more than once.
The primary reason why the project team and getting together, we had presentations from all kinds of contractors, from designers, from industry folks, from folks who have implemented projects with different processes. And the overriding considerations that made us select design, build, operate are we get a competitive life cycle cost comparison through this process. You do not get that with any other process. So if you go to a design, bid, build, somebody designs it, somebody builds it, and then you or somebody operates it. This way, we see what the cost is all the way through the process and what it would cost to run it for 15 years. It's the only process that allows us to do that. And they give us a lump sum price. And so they tell us that if you select us and you select our process, then this is what it's going to cost. These kinds of delivery approaches don't have change orders. Very, very uncommon. The only way we would probably encounter a change order is if we as an agency change the scope of work. So it is as close as you can get to having a guaranteed price. Much more so than any other process. That's the primary benefit to the water agency.
Any further questions, at least at this point? And if not, I would ask representative who is going to give the presentation from Balfour Beatty to please come forward. And please introduce yourself, please. And also, if you can keep this as short as possible without truncating the necessary information we need to hear from you, that would be great.
Will do. Good afternoon, board members. My name's Crandall Bates. I'm with Balfour Beatty. I'm the Western Region Manager. Thank you for time to present to you guys here. I know we sent some letters, and I appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to have a spot on the agenda. It's good to get out of the dugout every once in a while. I take it you guys all have the handouts that we have up, and we're going to make this super brief, less than 3 minutes. As Jim said, we are here, very amicably There's no hard feelings. We're not here to antagonize anybody. We just feel very strongly about our position that we think a fourth team should be qualified and be considered in this pursuit. That's the reason we're here. And we'll just look at the first slide. We think that if you do allow this fourth proposal, you guys are going to have a contingency in the event that one of the teams drops out. And who knows if that'll happen or when. But it gives you a little added insurance. Two, we feel more competition is going to drive down the pricing. In this day and age of budgets spiraling out of control, and if you're in the middle class or low class, I mean, rate payers and utility bills, I mean, these are big concerns to a lot of folks out there. So being more competitive is, we feel we can, and show you, based on our history in the last 10 years, how we have been more competitive that could help this pursuit. The last one, we feel we put together a stronger team. Some people have some different opinions, but we feel that we picked a first-class designer and a first-class operator in Southwest and Black and Beach. So we feel we're solid. Yeah, Dave, you mind the next slide? Here's the team. Again, it's just us as the project guarantor, the designer and constructor with BV, ourselves as a constructor, and the operations on the Southwest side. We have been a leading contractor in waterworks in the Sacramento area for more than a decade. Our company's been around 100 years. We're here to stay. We're not going anywhere. We bid over 600 and constructed over $660 million in local facilities here in Northern California. And our designer has designed and constructed more than 20 water treatment plants that parallel this benchmark treatment system that's contemplated for this job. We can cut through these slides pretty fast. These are just some of the jobs in the Sacramento Valley area that we've recently constructed. This is the Vineyard Water Treatment Plant for the County of Sacramento. It's a 50 MGD plant. It's expandable up to 100 MGD. We're just finishing up. Freeport Regional Water Intake. I'm sure you guys have heard the stories about this. Eric was the GM down there. Again, a real first-class facility. Came in on time, on budget, no claims. Folsom South Canal, we recently just finished these two pump plants. This is for East Bay Mud out in Central Valley and in Lodi. And okay, next one's EA Fairbairn. This is just the City of Sacramento plant by Sac City College, recent upgrade. Next one's Sacramento Intake. You've probably seen this. Looks like a dragonfly out on the Sacramento River, right next to downtown. Next slide, Roseville Water Treatment Plant. This is for the City of Roseville, water treated out of Lake Folsom. Studies show that increased competition brings down project costs. We're not making the stuff up. Reducing bidders, it will increase project bid prices. The record speaks for itself when it comes to that. And also restricting bidders can increase accepted bid price. And this is from American Civil Engineers Society and the Public Works policy. This last slide, this is what I wanted to show you real quick. This is just our what we've done in the valley in the last 5 jobs we've had. We've been low bidder on these jobs. We've saved the ratepayers over close to $12 million. Average savings is about 3.2% on all construction projects. If you were to apply that same percentage to this project, I believe the estimated total project costs $320 million. I believe the design build for the water plant and pipelines is about 3.2%. Theoretically, this is a $6.8 million savings if we could repeat what we've done in the past 10 years. So just to summarize last 3 points, again, we think if you increase competition, you're going to see some lower project costs, saving yourselves and the ratepayers money. Again, the insurance on as a fourth team, if one of the teams drops out, you're still going to have 3 good proposals. And the last one, which goes without, I mean, we were already qualified, but less qualified, I guess, than the other 3 that was mentioned by Jim. Last slide was just if you guys had any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bates. Board members, Marty?
Yeah, thank you. One of the qualifications that Mr. Yost questioned in your proposal was your operations team, that didn't have the experience of the others. Are you still proposing the same operations team?
Yes, Southwest Water. They do. If you had a chance to look at the proposal, they've done numerous jobs in California. They're a smaller outfit compared to probably some of the other big boys you've seen on the other three proposer teams, but they're qualified. They've got the technical expertise to run this plant.
Yeah, that was the question.
Anybody else, questions?
Well, Crandall, what's your firm's position on this potentially, pushing us into another $250,000 expenditure?
That's subjective, I guess. If you look at the total dollars, that could be, that could be two guys up to a year, depending on their hourly rate. I don't know Jim and Yost and how they operate it and how they want to review it. So, I don't think I could offer a valid opinion other than it seemed high to me, but I'm best left probably leaving it alone. I think on if you looked at the other end, I think that's a smaller amount compared to what could be saved if you added us, and if we could stick to this 3.2% that we've beat our competitors by in the last 10 years.
Yeah, sorry. I guess what I'm getting at is, I guess there was some suggestion that we might, and maybe Jim really already addressed this. So actually, I'm going to hold off on this and maybe ask Jim. Okay, I'm good.
Okay.
Any further questions? Any further questions for Mr. Bates? Don.
So the operations partner is called Southwest Water or something like that?
Yes.
So have there been complaints? Have they failed to meet standards for the operations? Have there been labor concerns? Have there been environmental problems? Have there been failure to comply with constituent readings? Have they met standards for state operations of the facilities they've been involved in?
No, sir, none that I know of.
Jim, is that consistent with your sense of it?
Maybe, Jim, you maybe want to sit at, Jim, would you like to please sit at the table, and that way we can keep Mr. Bates at the microphone? Thank you.
So I presume you're asking me what was the questionable reference that we got? Is that what's leading to your question?
I saw 3 on your slide where you sort of indicated where these guys were certainly qualified, but their team was less than. The areas were operating partner, inexperience in design, build, operate, and questionable design reference. So I'm wondering about the operating partner. Is that a problem area, or was it just not as large or in the length of time experience, or what was the?
It was just that they're smaller, less experienced than the operators that were in the 3 other teams. But we didn't get bad references on them.
Okay, it was just a matter of comparison to the other 3.
Yeah.
They weren't quite as well known and. Okay.
And not as strong, with staffing and so forth as the other 3 were.
These multiple projects, you knew about all the different projects when our review team looked into the different proposers?
We were very pleased that Balfour Beatty was interested in proposing on this project.
Okay.
I'd call Southwest Water a boutique O&M firm.
Any further questions for Mr. Beatty? Mr. Bates?
I have one.
Yes, David.
I just, a lot of what you're saying about the competition and whatnot, did you make these kind of comments in advance, when the shortlist process began? I mean, are you generally in favor of 4 firms, 5 firms, or, you knew there were going to be 3 firms shortlisted up front?
We did. And every owner is different. Every agency has different needs. We knew the rules, like Jim said, going into the game, so we were well aware of it. So we didn't try to convince him otherwise. Like I say, we understand what the rules are. We're just here because we think we can provide some more competition.
Good?
Okay,
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the public that would like to address us on this item? Nobody jumping forward? Mikos, please come forward, and if you could keep it to 2 minutes, please.
I can probably do better than that. One of the things that I had presented to you earlier today, and it has to do with ethical criteria, was just some evidence of wrongdoing by other prospective bidders. I felt, in addition to commenting on Veolia, an obligation to also address concerns about some of the other contractors. So one of the things that we've submitted is something on CH2M Hill, and there was some evidence of wrongdoing this past September 22nd. Regarding some allegations of submitting false claims and kickbacks. Likewise, with CDM constructors, there was evidence of last September 3rd about a 26-count federal indictment issued last December against United Water, which is a CDM subsidiary. So I'm not going to go into any of those allegations here, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention, and you do have a memo from me on that. Or it's not a memo, but it's an information sheet. Thank you.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the board here? We have public comment. Yes. Don't want to cut the public comment off, please.
Good afternoon, William Schwartz with Southwest Water Company. I just wanted to bring a couple things to your attention. First of all, J.R. Revis is our water treatment person, and him and Russell Trodes are like this, and I think it was, we were ranked as extremely high with our water treatment part of our process, and we're also an American-owned company.
Great, thank you. So we have this request to be included in the process. How do we want to handle this? Is there a desire to move forward, further questions, further consideration?
I've got at least one question for staff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and maybe you really already, I guess I'll, to Eric or Jim, maybe this was already answered, embedded in Don's question earlier, but I mean, is there an option that makes, any logical sense in this process for us to include Bellflower Beatty, but not incur the added, review cost, whether it's $200,000 or $250,000 or something like that? Could they be in for a period of time, and then could we down select from 4 to 3, or if we vote to put Bellflower in, are we really casting a vote to pay staff time for 4 full reviews as opposed to 3 full reviews?
Yeah, but I believe it is the latter. We would certainly want them to go through the process in a manner that's consistent with the other 3 teams, and that would only be fair to them, and it would only be fair to the other 3 teams. So, yeah, I would say they would go through the entire process just like the other 3 would.
Yeah, and then from a timing standpoint, you could achieve accommodating 4 proposals by staffing up, or if it's going to be the same people doing the work, but for 4 firms instead of 3. I mean, how much does that affect our timeline if we were to consider bringing them in?
Well, the major criterion we would use is to give these folks time to do their work so that their proposals are cost effective and very responsive. And if we had to speed up our analysis of their proposals, we could certainly do that and stay on schedule. So, if it will add additional workload and it could slow the project down, but we could prevent that if we decided to go this way.
Okay, that's good.
To follow up on that, because there was within the staff report and letter from Balfour Beatty is the assertion that by having the 4 firms to begin the initial bidding process, we would know where they lie on their bid, but that would be without evaluating how it weighs against the other 3 entities that would bid. So in order to do that, we have to do the actual processing, and there lies the cost.
That's correct. We wouldn't actually get to a price until late next spring or early summer.
Right. And then along those lines, and this kind of fits to the next item also, but it is to this one. We're talking 6,000 to 7,000 pages of documents that would be submitted, and we've had to review 1,200 almost pages of documents, of which I must confess I didn't get through all of them. I got through the service contract, I got through some of the appendixes, but that was within a 10-day time frame, bigger than War and Peace for me and a lot more boring. But it's a risk, I know, but we have to evaluate, does that risk have a reward at the end of it? And I think that's up for us here to determine. Marty?
Thank you. Yeah, to back up a little bit, I didn't mean to be offhand about $250,000, $300,000, but in the overall cost of this project, that really is it's not really even a rounding error. And if the potential is there for us to save some money on the overall project by having a fourth competitor in there, I think it may be prudent.
Any further questions, comments, or a motion?
I guess to Jim and Eric, if we approve this, are we going to hear from the fifth firm? And I'm actually very serious about this. I mean, we set up a process. We announced we were going to do 3. We asked staff to evaluate the 5. You came to us with a recommendation to go to 3. With all due respect to Bellflower Beauty, you did not speak at the last meeting when we were up here, and you were not in the final 3. You did not. And as a result, we took a vote based on the staff recommendation. And now lots of people have spent a lot of time considering whether or not to accommodate this at this point in time when you didn't speak at the last meeting. And that, I will say, that concerns me. And now it's happened. So at the next meeting, are we going to see another firm that shows up and says, well, you said $250,000 wasn't that much money to go ahead and put another firm in this, so we're going to put it, so hey, we're here too, and heck, we're only another $250,000, and we're only that much, we're only a 20% marginal staff time. So I'm interested whether or not there's going to end up being zero meaning to the staff work that took place from January until we down selected to 3. If we start moving in this direction. So it's a very serious question on my part, and I'd like to know that. And it's hard to know because we don't know this other firm. But if I were the fifth firm, I would say, absolutely, I got a case to be made that these folks want as many bids as possible and they're willing to pay for them.
I would note, Joe, that there's only one other firm left, and that's AquaCal JV.
Yeah.
Because there were, out of all of the RFQs, only 5 firms across the entire United States, and I gather, with one firm being based in France, that actually submitted.
Right, but the idea was down select from 5 to 3, and now we've gone 50. We potentially would be going 50%, backwards or off of that, and I think there would be every fair case for the fifth person to show up and say, us too. So I don't think I'm just making a decision I'm potentially not making a decision on one firm here. Quite frankly, if the other firm showed up here, I would have a hard time saying, well, yeah, you're really, really not qualified, and so we're not going to do you.
Well, then I think your question is pertinent, and I think an answer has already slightly been given. If AquaCal JV, have they at any point in time in this process ever expressed an interest whatsoever to be considered beyond the initial consideration?
They felt their team was very strong, and they were very disappointed that they didn't make the short list. We spent 2 or 2.5 hours with them going through how that happened, and I felt they left satisfied we'd given them a fair shake.
Is there any representative from AquaCal JV in this room right now? No. Very quickly, please.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to address 2 comments from Dr. Corboza. One, the fifth team supposedly was not qualified. And then also when we mentioned that we were unable to speak at the last meeting, we didn't know we were not qualified at the meeting, so we weren't ready, but also, that's why we sent the letter to Jim and then also to the board later to.
Right, but the staff report going into the meeting where we made the down select said that the down select was going to not include you. So unless you weren't following the staff report, we all had that recommendation coming into the meeting to go down to the 3. I mean, I was surprised at the last meeting that we didn't have both of the firms that weren't selected coming right there, right before us, right then, saying, hit the pause button. And, we didn't. And, I wasn't sure why that was, but it does make me a little bit more surprised now. And the firm looks very good and very qualified. I mean, don't get me wrong, but obviously we're being put in a position here to go against staff recommendation, once or twice and open up the door, so.
I understand. Okay.
All right, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so.
Marty, you had a question?
Well, no, it was just a comment, and it was what Jim said at the outset, which is that the 5th team was not qualified. They didn't meet the qualifications for this. I don't see them submitting a qualifying response to the RFP or for the DBO. I'm not worried about them. What the concern for me was that this particular group seemed to be in a middle ground, and I'm not sure it's not a good idea to include the middle ground group. A, in case one of the others drops out, then they're already in the process, we don't lose time. And B, if they are competitive, as they say they are, then it has the potential to push down the cost of the project.
I guess for me, because I haven't really spoken to this yet, and I will have a question. We have 3 out of 4 board members here. If there's a 2-to-1 vote, that is present and voting?
Action requires 3 affirmative votes.
That's what I thought. So this is a matter that if there is going to be a split, and from what I can see, there's a little, I may be in the middle of my 2 colleagues here, and I guess the bottom line for me is this. If they were good enough to be in the dugout, I think they're good enough to play on the team. If we had evaluated that they should be there, just in case, I think we're saying to them, yeah, you should be there, but we don't want you to be prepared in case you have to play. And I think they have to pay to play in this game because it is going to be their capital, along with our capital too. But it's an investment that has a risk with hopefully a percentage of a greater reward at the end of the process. And so when I look at the addition of the 4th entity, I understand very clearly what staff has said here. But we're in an environment that we need to tweak this cost down as far as we can tweak it down. And if we can send it down another 3%, 4%, and frankly, I'm going to say to everybody out here in the room, you better ignore our engineering estimates because I, as a board member up here, believe that in this bidding environment, I'm going to see 15 to 25% less than what our engineers have estimated. So I'm looking for 260 million, not no 325. That's what I'm looking for. I want to see a project as low as we can get it. This is work people need. It's work you want. This is a time in which we should be seeing the lowest amount of money that we have to spend on a project. I want that. We need that. Our community, the city of Davis, we really need that. We're in a battle here, and we need to see something. So in order to assure that, even greater downward movement, for me, I think it's incumbent upon me to bring in a 4th firm and expand the number of bids and give the possibility for a greater decrease in the cost of this project to the Woodland residents and to the Davis residents. Public comments, sir? Or, yes. Yes, but wait 1 second. Are you with one of the firms?
Yes.
Yes, you are. Could just wait a second. Board members want to respond, and then I'll take your comment, sir.
I'm not going to foreshadow my vote, but I spent a lot of time in the dugout in Little League, so I just want people to know that.
And
I didn't like it, you know.
You always wanted to play,
and I was really
too,
good,
I bet.
you know.
You always wanted to play, I bet.
I always wanted to play. Anyway. And I wasn't good enough to. Anyhow.
Well, I hear you, Joe. I spent time in the dugout, too.
My
Yes.
name's Joe Glicker. I'm with CH2M Hill. We're one of the 3 firms that were qualified, and just want to speak, given the course of the discussion, say a few comments. Wasn't intending to speak, but I don't want to, taking the board member's direction here, I don't want to come back next month and not have spoken at this one, so I will speak now a little bit. I do not have a specific position to tell you, but I'll tell you some considerations. When we look at projects to go after, it is a big investment, so there's some things we look at. One of the things we look at is the nature of the board, and can we rely upon what they've told us at the beginning through the end. And that affects our price more than the competition does, in all honesty, because our price is going to be what our price is. As long as there's competition, we know that there's competition, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10. Our price is going to be our price. But what does affect our price is, what's the owner like? Can we rely on the word of what the owner is telling us, or does the owner change their mind constantly? That increases our price if we see that, so that's a factor for us. It's also a factor because of the high investment on this. We do look at, do we want to spend our money here, or do we want to spend our money there? And how aggressively do we want to go after this particular one? How much money we spend on it relates to how tight our price is, because the more effort we put into it, the more our price goes down. But if we think that, our chances are just kind of out of line, we're not going to put a lot of effort into it, and our price is going to go up. So, the idea that competition is good and competition reduces prices, but, nobody's shown you graphs of the number of competitors and, what the price does or doesn't do. And, if you do, you're certainly free to add the 4th one to the bid, but, I would say we would reevaluate our position based on the draft RFP and that fact once we see it, to see, is this still a procurement we want to go after? At the moment, there's nothing that says to us it isn't. We like this procurement, we want to go after it, but if the procurement starts to change in material ways, we'll reevaluate that position. So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, anybody want to speak from the field here? Any motions?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. I'll fly one. I'd like to move that we add Balfour Beatty back in as a 4th contender in the RFP process.
Second that motion? I'll second the motion, since I don't think I'm going to get a second from down here. Speak to the motion?
I think you said it quite eloquently. I would like to see the price in this project go as low as we can get it. And I understand the statement just made by CH2M Hill, but this is a good job. It's out there. And if they feel like they are the best ones to do it, I don't see whether they've got 2 competitors or 3 competitors making a difference to them.
I would add to that for me, as somebody that has followed this whole process from 2004, not really following it much before that, to a large degree, going all the way back to 1989, I can say that I have believed that we need this all along. And I am committed in every aspect of my being to seeing this completed. For you, as folks that are going to risk capital out there, I have to say to you, I'm going to work diligently to make it happen. And I can also say that this is work that, in this capacity, doesn't come along very often. So, and I believe we are going to be fair. I believe that our word is our bond, and we have indicated that we had an interest in seeing a 4th team player. We never said that up to this point, we didn't include them in the bidding process. We included them to the point that if one of the 3 had dropped out, they would be instantaneously put into the field to play. I think it's time to play with 4 members on the field right now and make this as good a process in a bidding environment that it can be. And so I'll support the motion. Yes, please, Don.
My comment has to do with the way the JPA is structured, and we deliberately, when we set it up, have set it up without a tie vote. And we did that on purpose, and the idea was that the body would move forward through consensus. And I think the idea of having a 3-vote requirement to take an action is a good one, and this is one of the many tests that you'll experience in this process. I think that if Director Marble were here, we could imagine what he might say. It's very likely that he would talk about the principle of making a decision and sticking with the decision, I expect. I'm just guessing at that, so I'm sorry if I'm speculating, but I would imagine that Director Marble would probably have a pretty high bar for changing the decision that the board made at an earlier time. I don't know that, but I think that's a likely thing. One thing that we don't know is since he's not here, we don't know that for sure. And that leaves the board with the challenge of how do you move forward in this instance and others where you have some pretty strong different principled views, and how do you make a decision on this process. I think that of course one way would be for each member to look at what the others have said and think deeply about what the meaning is and what the intention is, and well, based on that listening, try to make your best choice. So I think that you've got a lot of people around the community. Both communities are watching each of your actions. You know that people want to see a really clear competition. The design, build, operate is new to people. The community doesn't really have a good feel for how it works. They're interested in making sure that there is good, hard competition. But there's a lot of interest in making sure the price is lower. I can't vote on this. I don't know where I would vote if I was in your shoes, but it is one of the many tests that you're going to have on how to move forward with consensus.
And I think those are very wise comments, and I remember the conversation we had when we talked about a 4-member body versus an even-numbered member body versus an odd-numbered member body. And there was quite a bit of conversation about what might be the case when we get to this point. And we have actually arrived at that point now. We have not had too many votes that weren't unanimous. I think there's just a couple I can recall that were 3-1 votes.
I can't remember any.
There's been just very, I think, minute ones that were very small items, but this is a large item. This is a very large decision here, including the one that's up after this one. So I concur. I was thinking the whole time that, what would Bill say? You know, he gave me some of his questions, I asked some of his questions, but he didn't give me his comments. We have not spoken on this matter, and nor, because I have a Brown Act partner on this matter, I've spoken to him on it to a small degree last night. We conversed. So I know we could take a vote here, and that vote could be one that may have to call for a reconsideration, but my preference being that it won't matter to any large degree if it's a month from now, if we include a 4th team. We've given our comments to the teams that are out there, including the 4th team that is out there right now. So my preference, Marty, would be to wait for Bill, and hopefully, you know, for us all to cogitate on it a little further and come back and make a decision. There's no immediacy that we have to act on this today. I mean, we are putting out the documents, the DBO documents. Was it October 4th? Is it?
Well, the next agenda item is for you to give approval for the draft RFP to be issued to the shortlisted firms.
Mm-hmm.
So without a decision being made, that would still be in limbo, whether it's the 3 firms or the 4 firms.
Yeah.
So they really go hand in hand, and there's additional information going to be provided in the next item relative to the overall process and the schedule, which might make you make your decision. So that might be something you might defer this until hearing the next item. But they both go in tandem, in my belief, to keep on schedule.
In fact, that may be the case. I was kidding Dr. Marble that could you come back. I could call him.
He can't vote. But I'm missing something. Why does it, other than the extra cost of printing another packet, why does it matter if you give one to Bale or Beatty? I mean, at this point, they can't respond, but they could at least start their own review of it.
The document's going to be a public document anyway, so they'll have access to the entire document.
Yeah.
I just have to tell you that I feel strange being in a position where I'm putting you, but I have a strong belief that we have told these folks what the rules of the game are, and that's the strongest thing that drives us. And if we change the rules, then we lose some credibility. That's my biggest concern.
I guess I would have hoped that, and Board Member Cravoza, I wished you'd never put that fourth member in the dugout. It was your motion that got it there. But here we are with the dilemma. So it's, I would say can we put this, we don't have to act on this immediately. We can, we have a motion on the floor.
Well, we can withdraw the motion.
And the motion can be withdrawn, and if we can bring the item back for the night, if we please, if we want to, if the fourth member actually shows up.
Yes, it might be a good idea to put decision on this matter on hold until after you've considered the next agenda item, which is related.
Yeah. It would be my preference to for any further consideration, wait until we hear the next item.
Okay.
Good.
But just so the record's clear, I would recommend that
Yes.
the mover and seconder withdraw the motion, so it's not,
Do we need to withdraw, or can we just table?
or
Withdraw.
move to table.
Let's table it.
Table the motion, okay.
Stephen, I'd like to make just a short remark. I mean, I want to say that, I am very impressed by Balfour Beatty's qualifications, and actually I'd like to apologize. I don't mean to get overly strident here on this whole issue. I really put you on the spot there, but I just, I do lean pretty heavily on the side of, a clear and predictable process and, deference to staff, unless there's really reason to go away from it. So I do appreciate you guys being here and challenging us to think about this. That's all fair. Good. Okay.
Okay, then let us go into the next item, which is a very, very important item for us.
Yes, the next item would be an update of all the activities that have taken place in the last several months relative to putting together the draft RFP, which addresses technical issues, legal issues, financial issues, and as you've noted, it encompasses many, many pages of documents. And to give you an overview of that and the key factors that are going to be asked of the shortlisted firms, you have to ask Jim Yost and Jerry Gilbert to give their presentation.
Members of the board, Jim has delegated this to me, and I find that given all the discussion that's gone ahead where you'll find some redundancy and duplication, and I apologize for that, but let me go back to square one, and at the risk of duplication, just to run through the thread here. We did a great deal of work at the outset to try to develop the best procurement method. We formed a facilities procurement committee that Jim described. The list of its primary duties are on that slide. We have come up with a recommendation today to release a draft, I underline the word draft, set of documents to the shortlisted firms, but as has been pointed out, that set of documents is available to the public, so that in addition to getting individual comments from the three shortlisted firms, we could get comments from anyone of the public and consider those as we move forward to convert the draft from a draft to final document for your approval for formal release to the firms to solicit the final, or rather, to really initiate the proposal process. This, I might add, this draft review process we're going through is not done on all DBO projects. We've added this element in order to be sure that the document that the bidders are going to respond to is as close to being something they could accept as possible. We've listed there the facilities, and in light of the earlier discussion today, could you, yes. The second bullet obviously would be modified by the discussion with regard to Plan B. The next slide is maybe a little bit duplicative of the discussions, but I want to make a comment about the DBO process. It is very different than a design build or the traditional delivery because it integrates, makes a single team to work together on the design and the construction and the operation. And it assigns the responsibility to one firm, and it gives the agency a price to operate that plant and to build it and design it at a fixed, known price in advance. And it's competitive, and you know that early. We will be operating on a life cycle cost comparison, and just to put a framework of that, the operating costs are roughly going to be about a fourth to a third of the life cycle total cost when you add in the capital. So that tells you and the proposers will be balancing those two costs within their team. And we will not see that balance. We will just be able to evaluate the least cost to the agency of 15 years of operation and the capital costs that will be proposed. The result is a collaborative process that we hope will provide the least cost and the highest quality. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'll talk a little later on about the selection criteria. As I will about the risk issue. Let's go ahead with, we are about at the, close to the second star there in the procurement process. The documents that will be released to the short list or as modified based on your earlier discussions are shown in the next slide. There have been some last-minute changes in a memorandum that you have received, dated, I think, today, but those are mainly technical in nature. That's the list of documents. It's quite extensive, and I will comment in detail on some of those in the latter part of the presentation. The schedule is on the next slide, and this is an abbreviated schedule through January 6th, and the key points I want to mention are the first item, which is today, the deadline about a month from today for proposers to respond to the RFP or any adjustments that we would make. We would then have meetings with the individual teams to discuss their comments, and then we would proceed through the remainder of the items and hopefully reach an issuance of the final RFP the first week in January. The next slide just, yes, sir.
Slide, you've got a November 1, then the 2012 on this second one. Is that a mistake, or is that?
That's an error.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Okay. The next slide shows the capacity issues that were mentioned earlier. I don't know that we need to do it, but I do want to comment on the next slide. And maybe start out by saying, you asked a question, Chairman Sousa, about the technology of the future. And this competitive process is supposed to give us 3 or 4 different or different concepts of this project. 3 or 4 different prices, 3 or 4 different projects, and 3 or 4 different sets of people who are organized in a way to deliver the project. And we're going to be evaluating all of that. And one of those elements will be the ability of the technology proposed to accommodate future changes in regulations, or perhaps even future modifications of the technology that's being proposed based on what's out there. And I wanted to mention that. We've talked about the guaranteed price, the first bullet on this slide, that is really different than a guaranteed price in a traditional project delivery. And my experience has been in the most recent project that's delivered this way, the San Diego project, there were, I think, 8 change orders in the entire project. Of those, about 5 were based on unforeseen circumstances, a fire, other changes in regulations that could not have been predicted by the bidders as they prepared their bids. So this gives you as close as you can get to a firm price, as Jim Yost described earlier. The objective is to exceed all drinking water standards. That's covered in Appendix 10 and a section of the service agreement, Section 2.3. The delivery is guaranteed to meet the daily city demands for water. And if we go to the next slide, we get guaranteed completion with advanced knowledge of what the cost is going to be so that the financial people can plan bond sales to precision. The project is going to include a repair and replacement program that will be priced and included in the cost analysis. So that is part of the competitive cost thing, which gives you a guaranteed improvement without having to budget every year for these major replacements. You would be paying the cost, but it provides an assurance built into the contract. And finally, we have 2 items that have come up in previous discussions. One, Section 5.3.2.4, which talks about local employment and contracting and has a plan to be submitted for that, and a newly added section, and I think it's the first time I've seen that in this kind of a competition, a demonstration of a business ethics policy, and not only what their policy is, but how that policy has been implemented. The next slide talks about the key selection criteria. Those criteria are in RFP sections 6.1 or 2. So then I urge you to take a look at those because, again, this is a draft and we all can change it during the next couple of months. We talked about balancing cost and non-cost criteria. Obviously, that balance might be affected by the magnitude of the differences between the cost. There are the different cost items listed under price criteria. The non-price criteria, I've mentioned some of them, but I want to emphasize we will look again at team qualifications because the teams can add or subtract people, and we want to reevaluate that because those are the people who are going to be doing this project. And we will evaluate the other items in that list. Finally, and this is a recent addition. There is something I wanted to say about the selection criteria. We used an approach. People have asked us, don't you have a numerical listing of points for each item and all that? That's not the way the Facilities Procurement Committee did the qualification shortlisting, for better or worse. The way that was done was that the staff did a thorough analysis to see if the qualifications met the basic requirements of our request. And then, after that screening had been done, the 5 members of the Procurement Committee ranked the individual firms by each of the items in that list. So they came up with, this is the best firm, or second best, or third best, or fourth best for project design, well, or will be for project design. We didn't have design then. But for, let's say, qualifications for operation and so forth. So we would propose to use that process again unless there were differences of view that couldn't be resolved that way, and in which case we could then move to a point or scoring system. That hasn't been decided by the committee, but I wanted to answer it because it's been raised. Now, with regard to the private financing element, the current draft provides for a 20% retention of all project charges until construction is complete and the project is in operation. The purpose of that is to ease the cash flow burden to the cities of Davis and Woodland for the provision of capital funding during the 5-year build-up period. That doesn't come without a cost. And so you have to weigh that extra cost of whatever that is, that financing that would be done privately for that 20%, which amounts to about $50 million. You would have to weigh that against what it would cost for the municipal funding of the progress payments at the lower municipal rate. And so far, the representatives of Davis and Woodland have requested that kind of an ease-in to the capital projects of this, the capital cost of this project. They would be included in the lump sum proposal that we would see, so it would become part of the competition, and it would be repaid at the time it started. It also is provided for in a feature of state law that authorizes this kind of contracting, and Dick Shanahan could comment on that if you have any questions regarding it. And that concludes my comments, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Questions? Start with Don down there.
So I kind of get the point about the weighing all the criteria and ranking them, and have each of the reviewers do that, and then seeing where the chips fall in that relative ranking. My question has to do with the 50-50 balance between cost and non-cost. So I can't pick one of the items on that list of non-cost items that aren't important. However, if cost is only one of a dozen criteria, and something, then one of the firms meets every other, is top notch on all these other things, but is more expensive by a lot, I'd be pretty reluctant to tell the world that we're choosing the really high-priced firm because everything else looks good. So how do you get at that problem?
Well, I'll answer it by experience first, and then get directly to the problem. The experience has been, at least on the projects I've worked on, is that the lowest life cycle cost proposal has been both technically and from the standpoint of the team, the management and all of that, equal or superior to the other ones. I don't know why it's come out that way, but in the 2 Seattle projects and in San Diego, that was the case. The differences in life cycle costs were not very great. In the one case, San Diego case, the operating costs of the lowest proposer were higher and the capital costs lower. In the second, it was reversed. But the life cycle cost was lower for the process that was selected. All I can say is, as a practical matter in government, you have to justify all the expenditures, but you don't want to accept a project that has a non-cost item that you feel would be adverse to the community over a long period of time. And you just have to look at those items and weigh them.
Okay, but there's one thing that we know that all of the ratepayers in both communities are attentive to, and that's the amount of money that they're being asked to pay on a monthly or bi-monthly basis.
Yes.
We don't know for sure what the public view is on every other item that might be on the non-cost list. So there's no plebiscite or way of knowing that. We do know how important people perceive the rates to be. So is there some way that the rates and the life cycle costs could be more heavily emphasized than some of the, in some ways, intangibles that you have on this list? And I don't mean to belittle any of these items, because of course they're all important, but cost is, I would say that trumps virtually everything else.
All right, let me see if I can have maybe
and
two
it can't
comments.
be, trust me, because we've done this before.
Yeah. The 50/50 sends a signal to the shortlisted firms that you are concerned about the non-cost items and that you will give serious attention to those in determining the final selection. If you said, as an example, 90/10, cost being 90, 10 the others, that would say to them, not that any of the firms who would be shortlisted would provide a poor quality thing, but the message you're sending is that you really aren't as concerned with that 15-year operating period as you are with getting the lowest possible cost, just to pick an example.
Well, I think that there are lots of messages that we want to send, and I think it would be interesting to send a message to the firms that cost is pretty important, and that I wouldn't want to send a message that says, make sure you have good manuals, whatever you do, and that's equal to what the price is. So there are other people that this all sends a message to, including ratepayers.
Well, two thoughts. One, this group of proposers, 3 or 4, I think understands the message that you just described, and will be very aware of that when they prepare their proposals. The second thing is, this is not a one-shot deal 2 months after you release the final.
Iterative, goes back and forth.
There is this iterative process, and in that, the Facilities Procurement Committee will be meeting with each proposer separately and identifying those parts of the proposal that they feel are weak. So when you get to the point of receiving the final proposal, you'll have a document or a proposal that has been tailored for acceptability. And then you reduce the difficulty that we're talking about here between priced and non-priced.
Leave it to the rest of you to talk that over.
I must note that I have been told by 2 board members that they're going to have to leave at 5 o'clock and a little after 5 o'clock. That we are 6 minutes to 5. I cannot sit here by myself. I mean, I could, but I can't make any decisions sitting here by myself.
Might enjoy it more even.
Okay, I'll sit here by myself. But that means we more than likely are going to have to continue this meeting to a date certain, or just continue the meeting. And my preference would be to put a date certain so that we can at least notify the public now when we will continue this meeting. We can sit here and continue to ask questions for the next 6 minutes, but I just think we need to get this out right now and start to think about, and we're not even going to get close to answering all the questions. I have a whole host myself. And so what I'm getting to is, rather than run this clock out till 5 o'clock, what are our schedules like, at least for us board members up here next Thursday?
Open.
I just want to point out, this is a draft. This is a draft RFP. This doesn't commit the agency to anything that cannot be reversed when we finalize the RFP. So
right.
I know you've got a lot of questions. There are a lot of folks that have a lot of questions. We've got 2 months to answer all those questions. So
right.
If that is of any value.
That does help. I mean, and as I looked at the timeline, that even helped me with the item before, because in actuality, the agency board approval of the RFP is not even slated until January 4th. So the question that was before this question still has time to be answered. So With that, we can either continue this conversation at a date certain, and the other items that we have after this are informational, and one is just a memorandum of understanding on Reclamation District 2035, of which we don't even really need to answer it because we have been given the $1.165 million for all of the design of the intake facility. So we don't need to address that. So we have this before us. The question before that is not, frankly, in my mind, ripe, and then informational pieces. So we can either just allow staff to set up another meeting and adjourn this meeting, or we can set a date certain. What is the preference of the board?
Well, Stephen, it looks like we've got, unless I'm marking my calendar incorrectly, we have October 20th set.
Yes, we do.
Here. Next Thursday is bad for me. Next Tuesday and Wednesday are possibilities, but I guess I'd be interested in knowing if staff, believes we could, let out the draft RFP with, I think everybody in this room understanding that it's a draft.
Right.
And just stick to our October 20 meeting. It doesn't get us as far down the road as we might have wanted, but are there critical items? I mean, certainly, revisiting the Balfour Beatty request, could be done sooner, but maybe it can be done on the 20th. I know it leaves them, a little bit more in limbo, but I guess I'd be interested in what Eric and Jim might say to that. Or maybe you read it differently, but
I read that it is a draft, and the questions I have to the ethical component of it, the questions I have to some of the other performance components of it, the question I have to the labor component of it, right. The insertion of language concerning wages in Appendix 18.5, I would like to get that inserted. So I would prefer to have it inserted now, but I understand that insertion can occur during the comment period. So I understand that too. But my preference is to get this out with as many insertions and comments from this body before we release it to the firms that would be commenting themselves and the public commenting for that matter.
The only thing I'd like to add is that you're talking about the schedule, and the schedule really is a driver for this agency. We're already 2 months behind what we had intended to get out the draft RFP.
Mm-hmm.
And I think building on what Jim Yost had indicated, that this is a draft, and there is opportunity for you, everybody, the public, the shortlisted firms, all to provide input in the ensuing months. And I know what you mean. It'd be nice to have a nice and neat draft, but I'm listening to what you just said, rattling off all these things you'd like to have included. That's going to take more time and discussion. And again, the time is fleeting. And as far as I'm concerned, I like to always keep things on schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it is important to move ahead. With the proviso that it's not affecting yourself and others to have that input into the actual RFP.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I tend to agree with you. I'd rather have it go out in a more complete form. For one thing, I think when people see something that's incomplete and you come back and change it, it alters their expectations of what you were asking for. And also, my experience has been when things are published, they tend to get feet, and then all of a sudden they become the position. And I would like to have some of that, some of your questions, and I also have some concerns on the labor issues. I'd like to have some of that taken care of and wrapped up before it goes out. Are we married to Tuesday or to Thursday? Can we have meetings on other days?
Yes.
No, just the regular board. This is a special board meeting. The next regular scheduled board meeting is October 20th.
Okay, and we have another
Mr.
special
Cardozo
meeting.
pointed out.
We would just be adjourning to a date certain if we choose to continue this meeting to a date separate from the existing October 20th date.
Now, I believe the 5th is a problem because that's the countywide leadership meeting, isn't it, Mr. Saylor?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know there's something happening on the 6th, and Mr. You've got.
I can't do the
Yeah, you
6th,
can't
yeah.
do, so what about the 7th?
Fine with me?
Or even the Monday, the 3rd.
Yeah, actually, the Monday, the
Well,
3rd.
I'll be out of town.
That's right, you're out of town.
Yeah,
Okay,
sir.
how about the 7th?
The 7th. Don, how's your schedule look for the 7th? David, okay. It's good?
All right.
So, time frame, 2 o'clock time frame, 3 o'clock time frame? It's all okay, Joe, for you?
Prefer 3.
3 o'clock, Marty?
3 o'clock's fine.
So then, it sounds like, we haven't checked with Dr. Marble, and I'm going to hope that October 7th at 3 p.m. is an open time frame for him. For staff, Mr. Yost, Mr. Gilbert, I'm sorry about this. Paul, you going to be around Friday? Linan?
It doesn't really matter. The only thing that benefits me in Woodland is if I'm sub-teaching, I can just fly out of the school and make it, and Davis means I can't take that day's work.
Right. I guess my preference would be to just continue it within this format that we have right here.
Davis is fine.
And so I guess the chair would move that we continue this meeting October 7th at 3 p.m. Is that the appropriate motion I would be making, Mr. Shanahan? Adjourn the meeting till October 7th, 3 p.m. Same location.
I'll second.
I'll work with staff to get a notice out to that effect.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Sorry, folks. We'll be back, and hopefully you will be too.